The signal did not arrive with fanfare. It came buried inside a routine deep space relay ping, wrapped in a frequency that Earth's communication arrays had not used in over a decade. A junior analyst named Priya noticed it first, not because she was looking for it, but because the encoding made her stomach drop. She had studied that pattern in her graduate thesis. She had written 40 pages about it. She had never expected to see it alive. She called her supervisor. Her supervisor called Admiral Dara Osai. Dara read the decoded message 3 times at her desk in the Earth Defense Coordination Center, a building that smelled of recycled air and old ambition. The message was short. The message was devastating. The Vari were dying. Dara had been 19 years old during the silence. Most people her age remembered it the same way: sudden darkness, screens going blank, the strange and total quiet of a world whose machines had stopped talking to each other. The solar event had not killed many people directly. It had killed them slowly, through the collapse of supply chains, the failure of hospitals, the breakdown of every system that modern civilization had quietly decided it could not live without. Hundreds of thousands were gone before the first Vari vessel appeared in low orbit. Nobody had fired on them, partly because there was nothing left to fire with, mostly because they did nothing threatening. They simply arrived, opened a channel, and a translated voice said something that Nala Ferris, then a young diplomat's aide, rendered into English as, "We see you are in difficulty. We have materials that may assist. May we approach?" They spent 11 days in orbit. They dropped energy converters, communication stabilizers, and medical synthesis units through automated landers. They fixed 4 failing satellites from a distance, using methods that Earth's engineers were still studying 10 years later. Then they left. No demands, no treaty negotiations, no territory claims. They just left, and the world they left behind slowly, painfully climbed back to its feet. Now their homeworld was burning. The Dreth Collective had been striking Vari colonies for 8 months. The signal from Elder Sukan's council described a mechanical organic species that consumed everything in its path, stripping planets, absorbing survivors, moving on. The Vari outer colonies were already gone. Their fleet was in pieces. The Convergence, the Dreth main strike force, was assembling somewhere beyond the outer belt of the Vari system. When it moved, Sura would fall. Dara presented the situation to the United Earth Council 14 hours after Priya found the signal. She kept the presentation simple. She showed them the Vari's trajectory data. She showed them the Dreth combat footage recovered from the signal package. Then she turned off the screen and stood in front of 200 representatives in silence for a moment. 10 years ago, she said, a species we had never met crossed the dark to help us when we had nothing to offer them. They asked for nothing. They expected nothing. They came because it was the right thing to do. She paused. The Vari homeworld has a population of 6 billion. They have perhaps 60 days before the Convergence reaches them. I am not here to ask permission to help them. I am here to inform this council that the Interstellar Defense Fleet will be departing within 72 hours, and I would prefer to do it with your blessing. There was debate, of course. There was always debate. A block of representatives argued that Earth was not ready for open interstellar conflict, that the Dreth were unknown, that humanity had too much to lose. A representative from the Northern Industrial Bloc stood up and gave a very long speech about strategic risk assessment. Dara waited until he finished. Then she said quietly, "They came when we had nothing. We are going with everything we have." The vote was not close. Captain Rian Valdez had the crew of the IES Resolute on full readiness before the council vote was even finished. He had known Dara for 11 years. He knew how her votes went. The Resolute was the flagship of a 200-vessel fleet, warships, support craft, supply haulers, and 3 experimental long-range vessels that had never been tested in actual combat. Nobody had. The entire Earth Defense Fleet had been built for a war that everyone hoped would never come. It had come, just not to Earth. Ambassador Nala Ferris boarded the Resolute with 3 translation AI units, 17 linguistic databases, and a recording of the original Vari transmission from 2031 that she had listened to approximately 4,000 times. She was not a soldier. She had no idea what she was doing on a warship, but the Vari had spoken to her first, a decade ago, and she was not about to let someone else do the talking now. The fleet launched on a Tuesday. There was no ceremony. The ships simply rose, one by one, through the atmosphere and into the dark, their engines leaving brief bright lines across the evening sky that people on the ground watched from rooftops and beaches and open fields without quite knowing what to say. Dara stood at the forward viewport of the Resolute as Earth fell away behind them. She did not feel heroic. She felt the weight of 200 ships and every soul aboard them, and the 6 billion lives waiting on a world she had never seen. Rian came to stand beside her. "Jump calculations are locked," he said. 14 hours to the Vari corridor. "Good," she said. He glanced at her. "You doing all right?" She watched the stars ahead of them, cold, distant, indifferent. "Ask me when we get there," she said. The fleet moved into the dark. The Vari corridor was not supposed to feel like anything. It was a navigational lane, a mathematical path through folded space, a gift the Vari had transmitted to Earth in a data packet 3 years after the silence. Earth's physicists had spent 5 years arguing about whether it was real. Then they built an engine that could use it, and the argument stopped. Traveling through it felt like moving through water that was also light. The hull did not shake. There was no noise. The stars outside the viewport did not streak. They simply vanished, replaced by a soft, pale luminescence that had no source anyone could identify. New crew members tended to stare at it. Veteran crew members tended to avoid looking at it entirely. Nala Ferris stared at it for the full 14 hours. She was in the secondary communications bay when the fleet dropped back into normal space, and the pale light vanished, and the stars returned, and the first thing her instruments showed her was wrong. She checked them twice. Then she pulled up the visual feed. 3 Vari colony worlds sat in the outer system. She had studied images of them during the journey, the rust-colored plains of Vari Secundus, the twin-moon silhouette of their agricultural station, the faint blue haze of the atmospheric processor on their mining colony. She had looked forward to seeing them. They were dark. No signals, no heat signatures, no lights. Just 3 cold spheres sitting in the quiet of space like stones left on a shelf. Around them, spread across 400,000 kilometers of orbital space, was the wreckage of what had been the Vari Outer Defense Fleet. Hundreds of ships, twisted, gutted, drifting. Some had been cut open so cleanly it looked surgical. Others were simply gone, leaving only debris fields that caught the distant starlight and turned it into something that looked almost beautiful and was not beautiful at all. The Resolute's bridge was silent. Nobody spoke for nearly 30 seconds. Then a weapons lock alarm sounded. Sharp, immediate, real. A single vessel had come out of the debris field on an intercept course. A Vari patrol ship, lean and scarred, with visible damage along its port side and its forward weapons array fully charged. It was broadcasting on a scrambled frequency that Nala's translation units tore through in under 4 seconds. The transmission said, "Unknown formation. You will identify or be destroyed. You have 30 seconds." Rian turned to the weapons station. "Hold," he said, and his voice had the particular flatness of a man who means it completely. Nala was already at the communications panel. She opened a return channel and spoke first in the Vari primary dialect, then shifted to the formal register used by their elder councils. She said, "We are not your enemy. We are the people of the 3rd planet, the Yellow Star world. You came to us once when our lights went out. We have come to you now. Please do not fire." The channel went quiet. 11 seconds passed. The weapons lock held. Then a voice came back, rough, exhausted, with the particular texture of a being that had been awake and afraid for a very long time. The translation unit rendered it in flat English, but the tone came through clearly enough. "That is not possible." Dara stepped forward and took the channel. "Commander," she said, "my name is Admiral Dara Ose of the Interstellar Defense Fleet of Earth. I was 19 years old when your ships came to my planet. I watched your landers come down from a rooftop in a city that had no power and hadn't had any for 6 weeks. I watched your vessels leave without taking a single thing from us." She stopped for a moment. "I have 200 ships behind me. We are here because it is right. Please let us through." Another silence, longer this time. The weapons lock disengaged. The Vari patrol ship, its hull designation translated roughly as Swift Reed, fell into position ahead of the Resolute and began broadcasting a navigation path. Rian followed it. The rest of the fleet followed the Resolute. They moved through the debris field slowly. This was not a tactical choice. It was something else. Something that nobody on the bridge said out loud, but everyone understood. You did not speed through a graveyard. The commander of the Swift Reed gave his name as Grath. He spoke through Nala's translation channel during the approach, and his questions were direct. How many ships? What armament class? Had Earth encountered the Dreth before? What were Earth's losses in prior engagements? Nala relayed the answers. Grath was quiet after each one. When Rian told him this was humanity's first engagement with the Dreth, and that Earth had lost no ships because Earth had never fought them before, Grath did not respond for a long moment. Then he said something the translation unit initially flagged as an idiom before rendering it as, "Then you do not know what you have come to." "No," Rian agreed, "but we came anyway." Another pause. "That is either very brave," Grath said, "or very foolish." "Usually both," Rian said. "We find it helps." The fleet followed the Swift Reed deeper into the system, past the cold debris of the outer colonies, toward the faint light of the Vari command station orbiting the fourth planet. Through the viewport in the far distance, the Vari homeworld Sura was visible, a pale green sphere, still alive, still lit, still there. For now, Nala watched it grow slowly larger on the screen, and thought about what it meant to arrive somewhere as a stranger carrying the weight of a debt you had not been asked to repay. She thought about the first Vari transmission, 14 years ago. "We see you are in difficulty." She thought, "We see you too." Elder Sukan was smaller than Dara had imagined. She had built an image of him in her mind over years of studying the silence, a towering figure, something enormous and certain, the kind of being who could look at a broken planet and decide without hesitation to help. The being who walked into the meeting chamber of the Vari command station was old and slight, moving with careful steps, his 4 upper limbs folded close to his body in a posture Nala had already told Dara meant quiet grief. He stopped when he saw Dara. He studied her face for a moment, long, still, unreadable. Then he made a gesture with the lower pair of his limbs that the translation unit did not attempt to convert. Some things Nala had explained were not words. Dara nodded back. She hoped it was the right thing to do. The meeting chamber was a half-circle of low tables, curved in the Vari way that implied no one sat at the head. Grath stood against the far wall with 3 of his officers. He had not spoken since they boarded the station. He watched everything with the focused attention of a being cataloging threats. Sukan laid out the situation without preamble, which Dara appreciated. The Dreth convergence was assembling beyond the outer belt. Current estimates put it at 900 vessels, possibly more. The Vari had 60 warships left in fighting condition. Their ground defenses on Sura were functional but designed for atmospheric threats, not orbital bombardment. The Dreth did not negotiate. They did not respond to signals. Every species that had attempted contact with them had either been ignored or destroyed. The Vari had tried both. Dara asked about the Dreth's tactical patterns. Sukan passed data across the table, physical tablets, not digital transmission, because 3 of the 4 Vari network nodes had been destroyed in the initial attacks. Rian picked one up and read through it in silence. Then he passed it to his tactical officer, a steady, quiet woman named Bex who had the habit of making very small sounds under her breath when she found something interesting. Bex made a lot of small sounds. The Dreth fought in swarms. This was not metaphor. They literally coordinated as a single distributed system, every ship receiving the same targeting data at the same time, every unit adjusting simultaneously. They overwhelmed defensive perimeters by attacking from all vectors at once, leaving no gap large enough to hold. They had adapted shielding technology that could redistribute damage across a formation in real time, so destroying one ship often just redirected its defensive capacity to its neighbors. They were not individually brilliant. They were collectively unstoppable. Grath spoke for the first time during this part of the briefing. "Your ships," he said through Nala, "they are not formation-trained, yes. Your tactical structure is not fixed pattern." Rian looked at him. "We train for flexible response. Small units, quick decisions, individual commanders with real authority to adapt." Grath exchanged a look with Sukan. Something passed between them that Nala could not translate. "The Vari fight in structure," Grath said. "Our strength is the perimeter. We hold, we absorb, we outlast." He paused. "This is not effective against a swarm that can simply wait for the perimeter to tire and then strike every point at once." "No," Rian agreed, "it isn't." "And your method?" "Hit them before they can set the pattern. Break their formation before they can coordinate. Make them react to us instead of letting them dictate the shape of the fight." Rian leaned forward slightly. "The problem is we've never faced adaptive shielding at this scale." "The problem," Bex said quietly, still reading, "is that their shielding needs a second to redistribute after a hit. 1 second. But if you hit the same ship twice in that window, both hits land full force." Everyone looked at her. She looked up. "Sorry, it's in the data, right here. Their own after-action reports from the second Vari engagement. They mention it like it isn't important. It probably isn't against a species that fights in fixed formation. But if you're throwing multiple fast strikes from different angles, then the redistribution can't process them both," Rian finished. Bex nodded. "It's not a gap in their armor, it's a gap in their software." Grath stared at her for a long moment. "You found this," he said slowly, "in 12 minutes of reading our battle records." "I read fast," Bex said. The room was quiet. Then Sukan made a sound, low, resonant, that the translation unit rendered simply as approval. "They planned for 6 hours. It was not a comfortable 6 hours. Grath resisted several human proposals on the grounds that they contradicted Vari military doctrine. Rian pointed out, politely at first and then less politely, that Vari military doctrine had resulted in the current situation. Grath did not have a clean answer for this. He sat with it instead, which Dara found she respected. By the end, they had something that was not quite a plan and not quite a gamble. It used Vari perimeter discipline to anchor the center of the engagement and human wolfpack tactics to strike the flanks in unpredictable bursts, targeting the double-hit window Bex had found. It required the Vari and human fleets to coordinate on a level neither species had ever attempted with the other, which meant trusting communication channels that had not been tested, through translators working in real time, in the middle of a battle. Nala did not point out how many things could go wrong. Everyone already knew. Sukan looked around the table at the end. "The Dreth advanced scouts will reach us in 18 hours, he said. "They will come before the convergence. A test. They always send a test first." He turned to Dara. "We will see how your ships fight." Dara nodded. "And then they'll know." Dreth advanced scouts numbered 47 ships. They came in a compressed sphere, every vessel facing outward, rotating slowly. The Vari called it the sealed fist. It was how the Dreth tested a new enemy, not with aggression first, with presence, with the silent question of what you would do when you saw them and understood what was coming. The joint fleet had positioned itself inside Sura's asteroid belt. a dense band of rock and ice that Vari navigators had charted in fine detail. Dara had read those charts during the 18-hour wait and asked Rian which of their ships could navigate a field like that in active combat. "None," he said. "We've never trained for it." "How long to learn?" Their 4 best navigators had spent 16 hours in simulation. None of them were ready. All were more ready than before. The Dreth formation reached the belt's edge and stopped. Grath noticed it first. They do not usually pause. They are reading the field. "Let them read," Dara said. The sealed fist opened into a wide disk, ships spreading across thousands of kilometers, covering every approach at once. Standard Dreth response to an obstacle: be everywhere. Overwhelm all points simultaneously. The Wolfpack squadrons moved first. 12 groups of 8 ships hidden through the belt. No fixed formation, no coordinated timing. Each squadron had a sector and one rule: hit fast, hit twice in the redistribution gap, then move before the swarm could respond. The field was not an obstacle, it was cover. The first 4 Dreth ships broke apart. The swarm shifted. The human squadrons were already elsewhere. Vari perimeter ships held the outer edge, absorbing return fire, refusing to break, giving the wolf pack space to work. Then Grath left the Vari line. He took 3 vessels and drove them into the Dreth flank fast, close, the way the humans were fighting, nothing like Vari doctrine. He said afterward he had been watching the human squadrons for 40 minutes and simply decided to try it. 6 more Dreth ships collapsed before the swarm mind could respond. The battle lasted 2 hours and 11 minutes. 43 of the 47 scouts were destroyed. 4 were allowed to escape into transit space, intentionally. "So they can report back," Dara had explained during planning. "I want the convergence to hear what happened. I want them slowed down while they recalculate. Half a day might matter." Grath had been quiet. He was learning that silence was the human version of thinking more than you said. Or maybe it was his own version. 7 human vessels were lost. 11 Vari ships damaged. The dead were counted in silence. While Dara was reviewing the damage reports, Nala came in carrying a data tablet and a look that meant she had found something she was not sure how to say. She placed the tablet down and explained. In the captured Dreth communications from the battle, one word kept appearing in the same structural position in every command transmission. She had run it through the translation AI twice. The result was the same both times. The Dreth swarm was not distributed. Every order had come from one vessel. The swarm did not think together. It was commanded from a single source, and every other ship was a limb that moved when that source said to move. Somewhere in the 900-ship convergence was a command node. Destroy the node, and the body stopped. Rian read it over her shoulder. He said nothing for a moment. Then, finding one ship inside 900 disguised as the rest, how? Nala had the answer to that too. The node transmitted commands a fraction of a second before any other vessel, a tiny lead in the relay chain, detectable but only at close range. Close meaning inside the formation. The room was quiet. Rian said it first, which meant Dara did not have to. A 6-ship strike team, small enough to pass through the formation's inner edge during peak engagement when the convergence would be watching the main battle. Close-range sensors calibrated to the transmission delay. Find the node, mark it, call the coordinates to the main fleet for a long-range barrage. It meant flying into the center of everything. Grath was in the room. He had been standing against the wall listening. When Rian finished, Grath said, "I will come." Rian looked at him. "You don't need to." "You are going into the thing we have feared for 8 months, Grath said. "You are doing this for us. I will come." Nobody argued with that. The convergence arrived 31 hours later. The sensors picked it up while most of the crew was trying to sleep. A wall of signatures appearing on the outer edge of the system, filling the display line by line until the screen looked less like a tactical readout and more like a sky full of something very wrong. 912 vessels. 3 harvester-class capitals, kilometer-long ships that the Vari had only ever seen on long-range data, never up close. The formation was not the sealed fist. It was something bigger, something that had no clean name in either Vari or English. On the bridge of the Resolute, nobody said anything for a while. Then a crew member at the back said very quietly, "We really showed up." Someone else said, "We really did." Dara opened the fleet-wide channel. She did not give a long speech. There was not much left to say that the moment hadn't already said for her. She said, "Every species that ever faced the Dreth faced them alone. Today that ends. Strike teams move on my mark. Main fleet holds the line. We do not stop." She paused for 1 second. Mark. The fleet moved. The inside of the convergence was not what Rian had expected. He had imagined it like a wall, a dense press of ships so tight you could not move without touching something. It was not like that. At the scale of 900 vessels spread across combat deployment, there was space between them, lanes and gaps and corridors of open dark. The problem was not the density. The problem was that every ship in those corridors was looking outward, and the strike team was moving inward. And the only thing keeping them alive was the fact that the Dreth swarm mind was currently very busy, with the main battle 3,000 kilometers behind them. Rian's 6 ships moved without running lights. They moved slowly, far below combat speed, which was uncomfortable in every possible sense. But slow meant a smaller energy signature. A smaller signature meant a few more seconds before any individual Dreth unit noticed them, and a few more seconds was currently the most valuable thing in the universe. Grath was aboard the second ship in the formation, a Vari light vessel called the Thin Blade. He and Rian communicated on a tight beam channel that Nala had confirmed the Dreth could not intercept, one of the few genuine advantages of a language no one else spoke. The channel was mostly quiet. Both of them were focused. But occasionally Grath would say something, brief and factual, about the Dreth ships they were passing close to. The way their hulls were organic in texture, not manufactured. The low-frequency hum they emitted that made Vari crew feel physically ill. The fact that every Dreth vessel, no matter its size, had a faint reddish luminescence at its core that pulsed at exactly the same rate across the entire formation, as if they were all breathing together. "They are not machines," Grath said at one point. "They are not quite alive either. They are something we do not have a word for." "We have a word for it," Rian said. "We call it unsettling. That is a feeling, not a category." "I know, it fits anyway." The sensors were picking up transmission data continuously, and Bex, patched into the strike team feed from the Resolute, was running the delay analysis in real time. For the first 40 minutes, every ship around them registered the same transmission timing. The node was not near the outer edges. It was deeper in. They kept moving. On minute 53, Beck said, "I have something." The delay was there. A ship 700 meters off their port bow, indistinguishable from its neighbors in shape and size and the pulsing red light at its core, but its transmissions were arriving 0.4 seconds before the ships around it. Not sending and receiving, originating. Every order that had driven the convergence for the past hour had come from that hull. "That's the prime mouth," Beck said. Rian looked at it through the viewport. It looked like every other ship out there. That was the point. They could not destroy it themselves. 6 light ships against a vessel that was certainly armored for exactly the kind of attack it feared most. What they needed was to get a targeting lock on it and hold it long enough for Dara to bring the fleet's long-range barrage capacity to bear. That meant staying still. That meant being visible. Rian told his team. Nobody was enthusiastic about it. Everybody agreed. They moved into targeting position. The moment their sensors went active for a clean lock, 2 nearby Dreth ships began to turn. The swarm mind had noticed something. The lock needed 12 seconds to establish. "Go active," Rian said. "All sensors now." The 6 ships lit up against the dark. every scanner running at full power, making themselves bright and obvious and impossible to miss inside a formation of 900 enemy vessels. Grath's voice came over the channel, very calm. "This is a very human plan." "Does it offend you?" Rian asked. "Not particularly. I only notice that your plans frequently involve being briefly very visible in a bad place. We call it commitment." "I see." The lock established at 9 seconds. 2 Dreth ships had turned toward them. A third was moving. Rian transmitted the targeting data to the Resolute on a compressed burst and said 2 words: "We're clear." On the Resolute, Dara did not hesitate. She had kept the long-range barrage capacity offline during the battle, held it back. Let the Dreth assume it didn't exist. Now she opened it all at once. 140 vessels brought their full-range armament to bear on a single set of coordinates, and the result was not a beam or a bolt, but a sustained, concentrated release that burned through the dark like a scar across the sky. The prime mouth did not have time to issue a final command. The explosion did not spread outward through the formation in any dramatic way. There was no chain reaction, no cascade. Something simply ended. The Dreth went still. Not all at once. Ship by ship, across the 900-vessel formation, movement ceased. Weapons stopped firing. Propulsion cut. The distributed limbs of a body whose brain had just stopped sending signals drifted in the dark, suddenly and completely without purpose. Rian watched it from the middle of the formation, surrounded by dead ships, in a silence that felt very large. He opened the channel to Grath. "We have a word for this too," he said. Grath's voice was quiet. "What is the word?" Rian looked out at the still Dreth fleet, at the faint red lights that were slowly going dark one by one. "Over," he said. Grath was silent for a moment. Then in Vari, something that the translation unit rendered as, something that was nearly but not quite the same. The Vari did not have a tradition of public mourning. Their grief was private, held inside, expressed in quiet rituals that Nala learned about only because she asked and Grath was willing to explain. They carved names into the ground flat and flush with the earth, so the names would be walked on. So the living would carry the dead forward with every step, rather than looking back at them. When Grath told her this, Nala said, "We put ours on walls, tall ones, so we have to look up." Grath considered that. "You look up at them. And you walk on yours." "Yes." "Neither of us forgets," Nala said. Grath made the gesture that meant agreement in Vari formal register. It was the first time he had used it with her. She noticed. The ceremony on Sura's surface was small. Dara had not expected to be invited, but Sukan sent one message requesting Admiral Osai's presence, and it said simply, "You should see what you saved." No human had stood on an alien world before. The air was thin and tasted of something mineral and faintly sweet. The sky ran green at the horizon and deep purple overhead. The ground held low vegetation in colors that had no English names. The city nearby was built from stone that curved seamlessly from the landscape, as if the Vari had not constructed it but persuaded the planet to shape it for them. 6 billion people lived here. Many stood in open spaces and watched the human shuttles land with the focused stillness of beings trying to understand something that fit no existing category. Sukan met Dara at the landing steps. He wore deep blue robes. Nala had briefed her. Blue in Vari formal language meant this moment is permanent. I intend to remember it always. Dara wore her uniform. She had considered something different and rejected it. The uniform was what she was. It seemed right to arrive as exactly herself. They stood in the thin, sweet air before either spoke. Then Sukan said through Nala, "I made a choice once in a council meeting that lasted most of a night. Some colleagues thought I was wrong. They said your world was too damaged, too far, too unknown to justify the cost. I told them the cost of not helping could never be measured because we would never know what you might become." He paused. "I know now." Dara said, You made us who we are, not with energy converters or satellites, by showing us what it looked like to choose right over easy. We have been trying to be that ever since. We still have a long way to go, but we came. Sukan made a sound she had not heard from him before. Nala did not translate it. Her own eyes were full. The fleet spent 11 days in the Vari system. Human engineers worked beside Vari crews salvaging the outer colonies. 3 damaged Vari warships were repaired using human fabrication methods so structurally different that Grath's engineers found them simultaneously fascinating and maddening. 2 Vari scientists studied wolfpack tactics aboard the Resolute and ended up arguing with Bex about mathematics for most of it, which apparently was either brilliant or entirely broken depending on your axioms. On the second day, something unplanned happened. Young Vari salvage workers began sharing food with the human engineers during rest breaks. Not formally, just setting portions beside them, watching their reactions with quiet attention. The humans tried everything. Some was good, most was strange, all of it was accepted. Beck said it was the best diplomatic moment of the mission. Dara agreed. Rian and Grath had their drink on the last evening. Human coffee and a Vari root brew the translation unit called Deep Stone. Both made faces at the other's cup. No translation needed. "Will you come back?" Grath asked. "If you need us," Rian said. "That is not what I asked." Rian looked at him. "Yes, we'll come back." Grath nodded once. He did not say anything else. He did not need to. The fleet left on a morning when Sura's twin moons hung above the horizon together, one pale gold, one nearly white, against the green-purple sky. The human ships rose through the atmosphere one by one and gathered in low orbit. Below them the city lit up, every building glowing blue-white, not a signal, not a transmission, not functional in any measurable way, just light pointed upward. Nala asked Grath what it meant. He said, "In our oldest tradition, when someone leaves who has given something that cannot be repaid, we light every fire we have. So wherever they go, they carry the image of our light, so they know they are not going into darkness." Nala was quiet. Then, "We do something like that when ships come home. People line the shores holding lights, so the crew can see from orbit that they are welcome." "You do this for returning," Grath said. "You do this for departing," Nala said. A long pause, then Grath said, "We are very different." "Yes," Nala said, "and we keep finding each other anyway." The fleet entered the corridor. The green-purple sky of Sura was gone. Dara stood at the forward viewport as Earth's direction settled into the center of her view. She thought about a rooftop 17 years ago, a powerless city, lights coming down from the sky from beings who owed her world nothing and gave it everything they could. She thought, now we are the lights. The fleet went home.